Hello, my name is Carter. I'm a blacksmith here in Virginia, and I thought I'd start documenting my time and my work. So I think it's worthwhile sharing. We've got a really cool project starting on. It's a big gate. I just started forging my first couple pieces for it today, and we'll get to looking a little bit more into what I did today. And what's to plan for tomorrow or the next day in the shop. I'm calling for a big storm, but yeah, kind of classic blacksmith shop. Got a big power hammer and running a gas forge right now. In the other room we have some machining equipment. But here, let me show you some of my drawings and the steps that I'm doing and in what order I'm doing it. Okay, so first thing we're looking at are our gate panels. Okay, now these are relatively large. They're 13 foot 4 inches long in this dimension and something like almost 8 foot tall. So I don't have a ton of floor space in the shop. In fact, it's very cluttered. So there's a lot of rearranging and organizing that has to do for each individual step, which is fine. But it means that I've got to really think about my order of operations. So my first step, I think, is going to do all this scroll work up here. Okay, because this is going to be a unit, an assembly that will be, once I make it here on the table, I can put it up, lean it against the corner of the shop, build our frame, and then set this guy in place. But there's a lot of long straight bars that have to be manipulated into scrolls, and that needs a lot of floor space and swing room. And you'll see that when we get to doing it. And if I have a big gate panel, ready for this to be installed, it's going to be in the way of that, right? So we're working on this top step. First thing to work on is that top sweep, okay? And so if you can see, that's what I have laid out here. I've drawn out, marked it, and I've put this this batten, for lack of a better term. It's a fence for me to work to. Now I'm not going to hot bend that radius. It's all going to be done cold with some bending forks and just brute force. It's really not that bad when you're working with pieces this long. You can really manipulate it and get nice fine movement. The issue is getting it nice in a smooth curve, nice fair curve. But laying on the table here, I have these are 1/2 inch by 2 inch wide bits of hot rolled flat. That is the main structure of the runners of the gate. So you've got your top bar, your lower bar, and then you have this top swooping angle there. That's all 1/2 inch by 2. The scroll work inside is all 3/8 by 2. And it's got some really cool split scrolls that really don't come across very well on paper, but when you see them physically, it really, really pays off. But these guys are currently hot. I forged half of them. And so everything in this project, everything that I'm going to put together and forge is going to put together in fab is going to see the forge at some point. So from this point down, all that has been brought up to a good forging temperature and then forged a texture on it. The dimension of the material is not critical. It's not a massive structural thing, right? It's forging a little bit of thickness off of it is not going to kill it. This whole thing is overbuilt. But the texture you receive from just flat die forging and knocking the corners off makes a huge, huge difference. So I did the first half of that already today. I had to do it in sections because my forge is not very long. But the next time, I'll flip around and forge these guys, and I'll show you guys the other ends of them, and I'll show you what that's like. But once it's all forged, I'll then go through and cold straighten them, at least in this dimension. The bend in it, I don't really care because that's all going to get moved when we set it to this curve. And like I said, this is pretty much just to me to hold it up against and check. I'll have some bending forks set up, and I'll just work in those and get it bent and shaped to it. Maybe a little bit of hitting with a hammer, but it's all going to be done cold. This is much too large to do hot. And you might think you could roll this through a roller or like a tube bender kind of setup, but this is not a consistent curve, right? It's progressive. So that doesn't work as cleanly as you would hope it would. So we found that doing it by hand is kind of the best. So yeah, the next step is I'm waiting on these to cool down, and once they're cool enough to handle, we'll throw that end in the fire and texture that side and go from there. Okay, so we're about cooled down. We're over here in the forge, and I can only see, I can only do like 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet of heat at a time. So I'll come back, do 2 or 3 heats until I match up with the area that I've already textured here. This is still a little warm, but it's not hot. But we'll fire this guy up. He's pretty loud. I will fire it up and get it hot, and then we'll get under the hammer. Okay, so we have our two 1/2 by 2 inch pieces of top rail, forged and textured. This one has been wire wheeled. This one is fresh out of the forge. This has not been touched since it was textured. As you can tell, it's not very straight in any dimension, and it's still very scaly. This guy has been wire wheeled in rough fit. So if you take a look this way, he's been straightened pretty good. And if we walk around here and pull him up to our form, we're pretty close. We're pretty close. We've got about a 1/2 inch gap. That's, you know, it may be something here that's close enough. I'll have to look at it and make a determination, but it really is not much to get it farther, to fit a little bit better than that. But the way I did that is I straightened it all by hand with the hammer, mainly in the flat dimension, this dimension. This is the hardest dimension to move it. Obviously, it's the thickest part. To get all this fair, and I don't know if you can see it, down about there is a bit of a kink. So that's something that's going to get worked out here as I refine this closer and closer to the shape. But this is maybe 15 minutes worth of work so far. And the way I did that is I've got a receiver on my table here that has these bending forks, and so I can put my material in here and work this way using the weight of the table to my advantage. And I've also got this is a massive bending fork. This is really helpful for getting those kinks. So that little kink down there, right about there, if I were to put that into the forks on the table and try and, straighten that back out with any kind of length on it, it's not going to bend there. It'll bend over the length between my hands and where my bending forks contact. And the closer I get physically to the point that I want to bend it, the harder it is to bend, because you lose your the length of your lever, right? So this guy helps to do that, and I'll set the camera up here and give you a good showing of what that looks like. In fact, I'll set up and I'll fix that kink right there. But that kink has got, you can't just straighten it out, okay? And so if I draw this here, we're looking at a swoop and a curve that goes like this, and then we've got a kink. Now that's a massive exaggeration, but what really shows up is that bend. these two don't really show up. It's really hard to see that if you look down there. And so if I were to just take that kink out right there by straightening up this and just doing that, right? I get that bend out of it. Well, all of a sudden we're overbent. So to do this, I have to hit there, and then I also have to come back and pull those two out to bring it back fair. So there's a lot of little things like that that come with just experience and time doing this kind of manual bending. It just takes time. Now, I would love to have a big, strong hydraulic press with a big open working area, like a tire press would be great for cold work on these. We had one of those down in Kentucky, and it was fantastic for this kind of work. In fact, this is probably as big as I would want to go by hand. Any bigger than this, and it just becomes unwieldy. In fact, this is it's very heavy and long, so it kind of gets kind of miserable to work with. But let me set the camera up, and we'll throw this on bending forks and see if we can't get it to really fit this batten a little closer, and then I'll get that other guy called back up. All right. So I'm going to take a bit of chalk just so I can see exactly what needs to happen where. And so I'm making a line on the apex of the bends that I want to get rid of. All right, so I'm going to take this guy back down here. Throw it in the forks, and I want that line to be just on this side of this pin here. Now, as I was talking about earlier, if I come back here where I can easily bend this guy, what's going to end up happening is all this material is going to bend, and it's not going to bend here. Because most likely that kink is developed there because of a hard spot. It could be from manufacturing the steel, it could be the way I forged it and heat treated it. It's been through so many heat processes. There's no real way to say why that part kinked. And it could just be the way I processed it and bending it myself. You will find there are hard spots, especially if you forged it. So this guy lets me focus the bend just in the point between my two furthest forks. And I'll just come back here and I'll just give it a little tweak. It really takes very, very little. We're going to flip this guy around. So we have 3 points we're trying to fix here. Again, very little. You can feel in your hands after a little while. You feel the steel is springy. So you'll get a hold of it. You can move it a little bit, and you can know, okay, it's springing right back to its original position or close enough to it. But then if you just go a little bit past that, you can feel the steel become plastic and actually give. And then when you let off, it doesn't return to its original shape. Quite so close. So there's little tweaks there. Let's throw this guy back on the form. In fact, I can sight it. It is a lot better. I like to sight it from both sides, especially on a piece of bar that has had the corners chamfered off of it. If you had too heavy of a hit on one side, that chamfer actually could be kind of bulged, giving you a misread on the fairness of the curve. I can tell you right now, I still have that kink. So a little bit more to come out of it. And it's a little more severe. Look at it from one side versus the other. But that's right, we're still pretty close. We haven't changed a whole lot. And it looks like my marks are still in a good spot, so we're just going to leave those and do one more process here. One more round of bending. Now this one I'm going to do probably a little more aggressive. Oftentimes you can hear, if you're quiet, you hear the scale on the surface crunching. Because that scale layer is not flexible at all. Not the slightest. It is really, really helpful when you're trying to view curves or the straightness of something, or the twist, to be conscious of the background you're comparing it to. Now, what I mean by that is if I hold this guy up now and look at it, there's so much geometry in the background of my sightline. So this curve of the form, the straight lines of the middle of the table, the holes, all of that's influencing what I'm looking at. So if I bring it up here to the floor and put the end on the floor and use the concrete as a nice smooth background, it really, really clarifies what you're looking at. Now, we're a little farther away from our form in the center here, however, our curve is more fair. So we'll just crack on along, we'll do a little more tweaking there. You get it to fit a little better. It really does look very good. This end down here is actually extra. It's going to get cut off about right here and then joined to whatever's getting made on that side, but we're really very close. In fact, I think one of those by hand. That's super close. So, since there is structure going to be placed here, scroll work, this guy is not going to be relied on to hold that scroll work in place. Believe it or not, that scroll work is going to be more stable than this, just by the nature of the shape. And so what I'm going to do is set this guy aside. He's good. I'll catch that guy up. And then I'm going to clamp this with my batten here, and I'm going to put vertical pins, about like this, welded to the table, all the way along. And then that will be my fence. I'll have to have my fence on the other side of this. And then I will be able to draw in here and fill out and make our grid to make our scrolls. All right, as you can see, I've got both of our top bars made and the grid drawn. I moved my batten that we worked on the bottom side to set this curve. I replaced it with some angle iron strategically placed on the back side just to hold this guy in place. This is where our final position is on our top bar, and we're at the right angle. I've confirmed all that. I drew a 6-inch grid that matches a 6-inch grid that I have overlaid all of my scroll work. And now I'm going square by square and drawing out what needs to be made. And once that's drawn out, I can then come back with string and measure my drawing and start calculating how much material I'm going to need for forging. So I'm going to get cracking on that, get this all drawn, and start getting a cut list. And then once I get a cut list for this, I can just double that because I'm going to need to make 2 of these. So yeah, it's real simple. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It can be clunky and crooked and whatnot on here. It can be not graceful. Now it has to be close, but nobody cares what it looks like. This is just a guide for me to follow. When it's in steel, that's when we care about a fair curve, hitting all of our points, right? This just needs to be close enough to get us an estimation of material. And then we're gonna end up, say I need 15 inches for, this little bit of scroll. Okay, well then I'm going to cut 17 or 18 inches and have plenty of extra. That way we don't run out. But we don't want to end up with like a foot, 2 foot, 3 foot extra, right? We want to keep ourselves manageable. But each one of these scrolls is going to have, max 6 inches cut off of it. That'll hopefully maybe get repurposed somewhere else, but there's a lot of waste in this process. That's just the nature of the beast. As soon as you start trying to get it perfect and get tight, get close tolerances on how much material you cut and then forge, you're going to end up short on one, and then you have to piece stuff together, then you're welding and extending stuff, and then you're trying to scroll stuff that you've welded on and extended, and it just doesn't work out. It's miserable. You're much better off spending the extra couple dollars on the extra material you cut off. And then that stuff can be spacers later, filler, all sorts of stuff. It's not that it's going to go completely to waste. But I'm going to go ahead and continue drawing this, hopefully fill it out, give you a little idea of scale, and then we'll start measuring. I'll just go over it and confirm I'm in the ballpark. From where I'm standing, it looks pretty close to what we want to end up with. Now, I'm probably going to put some small tacks in the back here to hold this up so I can get rid of these clamps so I can work in here. But I'm pretty happy with that. So now I'll go over it with the string and get measurements and do forging calculations, and maybe another time I'll go over that on video. It's not all that terribly complicated. But yeah, time to start cutting some steel. All right, so I just got done with the first batch of forging and texturing on all the scroll material. There's some short pieces down there, longer pieces up here. Not everything is done. Some stuff, like this guy's still got some clean on this end, but they need to cool down so I can actually flip them around and handle them before I can finish texturing. There was a little bit of drawing out there. I tapered down to the ends. They're going to be the inside of the scrolls. So once these are cool, I can flip them around, throw them in the forge, finish texturing, finish tapering, and then I can immediately get the scroll jig out, get the bending forks out, and get these fitting onto the table. Okay, so we've got a few of these scrolls. The ones that are already fully textured and tapered, I've got laid out matching which ones they're going to go to, right? So this guy here goes to that small scroll. The big one here still needs the end forged on it, and a couple of these are out here matching. So this is all we're going to get to this week. Next time in the shop, we are going to finish texturing and tapering the remaining set for this panel, so the big guys, and then we'll actually start scrolling them, setting them in here, and probably tacking them together all the way around until we get a nice clean fit, and we'll weld it up. And as long as that goes well, we'll do the next panel. Probably get them all welded up, and then once they're both welded, we'll dress them both at the same time. We'll see. That's all gonna be timing, but for now, it's a good couple days in the shop. Get back in here next week and see how far we can get on this panel.